I'm back in sunny Ames, Iowa to test an owner's vehicle, something I've looked forward to driving for a long time. The E60 M5, manufactured from 2005 to 2010. And recently I've regretted, well, maybe not regretted, but thought about maybe I shouldn't have sold my E92. Now that I'm gonna get in this, maybe it'll bring back some fond memories. And when this M5 came out, so many people disliked the looks of it. It was such a departure for the 5 Series. And over the course of 13 years, it's aged extremely well, like many things about this car. Now, of course, the owner or previous owner has stuck on these double-sided tape carbon fiber accents on the front and back. But overall, this is an extremely sleek looking car. It's very European, especially in white. And then you have the Millennial 1A package with the roof rack and this cargo carrier that probably costs more than my Honda Civic. Now this is a last generation BMW before they ditched the high revving naturally aspirated motors. Now everything is turbocharged. This has a V10 that revs up to about 8,200 RPMs. And this is back when BMW was heavily invested in the Sauber F1 team. So they tried to project this motorsports-ish image to it. And this was a dream car for a lot of people back then, and it was so expensive. Now you can buy one of these for like $15,000 to $25,000 US. So it's more in that realm of affordability. Now on the inside of the M5, it's much like even modern BMWs. There's a level of simplicity here. They haven't overdone it with just nonsense, complexity. There's physical buttons here. And I really appreciate just how far ahead BMW was in terms of infotainment. Even back, 15 years ago, this iDrive setup is still quick. It's still easy to get around. Yeah, I mean, it's a little dated, but it's not horrendous like many other companies are. Now, you have an Alcantara Swedish steering wheel, paddle shifters. This has the SMG3 gearbox, which is horrendous. It's a single dry clutch unit. I mean, pretty much everything else is going to be familiar in here to most BMW owners, other than, cute little gimmicks like the seats hug you in turns in M mode. It will stiffen up so you don't, slide around your seat. Your M dynamic mode is configurable in here from 400 to 500 horsepower, and then there's 500S where it sharpens throttle response. All the stuff that you're seeing in modern cars now was included in this back in the day. Your gear selector, your EDC mode is all familiar. You can sharpen and stiffen how quickly the clutch engages, and if you have it on full engagement, feels like the transmission is going to fall out of the car. You have heated and cooled seats here. Little cute things like most BMWs, the cup holder stuck on one side. I mean, it's just a very classic BMW space. It's one that's inviting, comfortable, and, really you could take this anywhere, and that's why you would get an M5. All right, that's enough of that. Let's head over to Faye's Garage in Ames, Iowa, and take a look at the mechanical aspects of the BMW M5.
Well, you're back in Ames.
I made it back, yes. To
all 5 hours to Faye's Garage.
Yes, sir. And I came back to see this real honey of a BMW. What are we looking at?
Well, this premium automobile, in your words, is a 2008 E60 M5.
Okay, so this is the car that Faye's Garage will give you a free back massage for every rod bearing service, every throttle actuator service, every clutch replacement, differential service.
Our owner, a large Asian man, will give you a free back massage after you get your car serviced here.
Good, because you're going to be cashing in on that bonus with owning a car like this. So that's the interesting part about this car and the E90 and the E92 M3, which are becoming wildly popular. And that's primarily because you can buy them for low 20s to mid $20,000 range.
In the M5's case, you can get a 2006 M5 with an automatic if you want to roll the dice, for about $15,000.
And that's nuts. How much was this new?
I think, depending on options, you're looking about 100 grand.
So you look at this car about 10 years, a little bit over 10 years later, and it's hit the bottom level of depreciation. That's why people want this. It has really, if it was working perfectly, it has one of the best engines.
It's just like any M car.
Yeah.
When they work, if you buy one with a warranty, you could probably get one of these at CarMax with a warranty. They are amazing.
Yeah.
This thing is dominated by the motor. The V10 sounds like nothing else.
When you look at the underneath of this, you can tell, much like the E90, E92, you have a strut front suspension, you have an aluminum hub, all lower aluminum control arms, including the entire subframe is aluminum. There's reinforcements here for the M car. There's changes that they made to the chassis for rigidity for the M car as well. And you know, you see the little cooling bits. You know, you have the up kicks here to cool transmission, the various aspects of the under trays help to flow air. So
this has got a dedicated trans cooler as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they did think about things in the mid-2000s.
This was a serious car in its time, and it's going to cause you serious heartache when you take a look at how much your repair bills are going to be, though. You know, we joked around about the reverse mortgage. The buy-in is so low, but it's also so low that you can really budget for all the things that are going to go wrong or could go wrong.
If you are a DIY type, this is an awesome car. The guy who owns this is a technician here, and he loves it. I asked him, like, was this a good idea? And he's like, probably not. But
yeah,
I love it, and I can fix it, and this is the most amount of fun in his eyes that he can have for $25,000.
Okay, let's take a look at the transmission. Now that we're looking at the middle part of the car, we can see the transmission here. And one of the interesting parts about the BMW development is how things have come full circle. They went to SMGs, and then they switched over to dual clutch, and now they're right back to torque converted automatics.
The new M5 is a traditional auto.
Yes, and a lot of this has to do with cost and longevity, and talk about that with this gearbox.
So in the US, let's take a step back first. In the US was the only market to have an optional manual. There was such a demand in the US market for a true 6-speed manual that what BMW essentially did was ripped their 6-speed out of their 545i.
Okay.
It would be my preference of transmission.
Right, I think most people would.
A lot of people complain that the gear ratios aren't quite matched, but you would avoid the long list of potential issues you'll run into with this SMG. So you have clutch issues. This particular owner took his car to the track. He made it about 8 or 10 laps at Raceway Park in the Midland, the track you and I are both very familiar with, and he toasted his clutch.
Oh my God. What's the typical longevity of it? Like 10, or is it 15,000,
I think
20,000?
From what I've read online and what I've heard from actual owners, they get anywhere between 30, 60, and if you're a little old lady with her V10 M5, you might get 100,000 miles.
Okay. We made it in the back, Jack. What's all this gauze all over the exhaust?
Well, the owner, with this premium aftermarket exhaust, decided to add some exhaust wrap for added cooling and 5,000 horsepower.
It looks pretty serious. But what you're going to see here is a bunch of aluminum, including the subframe, much like what we saw in the E90, E92 M3. The other part is you have a mechanical clutch-based limited slip. No
just like in the E92.
Yep, exactly. The only difference here is it looks like it appears to be leaking, which is a big shock.
It is a non-serviceable part.
Is it really?
Yeah, that rear seal is non-serviceable. You got to remove the whole rear diff to
do anything on it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, interesting. So what else we got back here?
So something we forgot to mention earlier is this car has EDC dampers. They're not Magna Ride. They are as we like to call them,
electronically
digi-dampers.
controlled, yeah.
They are 3-way from what I remember. You have a normal setting, a sport-ish setting, and then you have full motorsports.
Oh, motorsports.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, full Nicki Minaj.
Yeah, you just put it in sport and it becomes motorsports.
Oh, damn straight.
So okay, we're waiting for it. What's wrong with it?
So, like many of the other parts of this car, you run into issues with it being a 10-year-old BMW.
Okay.
The EDC damper modules will fail, or the EDC struts will fail, or the wiring harnesses, themselves will fail as well. This particular owner has had to replace all of the above.
Does it work now?
Sometimes.
Oh, sweet.
I don't want to say kids, people my age, in their 20s essentially, will come up to me and go, "Hey, Jack Singapore, what should I buy? You know, I have $25,000. I got $20,000. I can buy a 335. I can buy an E92. I can buy a C63. I'm like, look, man, you can buy one of these, but can you actually genuinely afford to drive it?
We made it under the hood. What are you looking at?
Well, you're looking at a V10 motor.
Ooh.
Oh, I know.
That's too many cylinders for most people. There's no turbos, there's no supercharger.
No, this
what
is
is
a
this?
screaming 8,000 RPM V10 M5.
Naturally aspirated. Boy, I wish they would start doing that again. So really, you know, there's a lot of technology in this engine. This is back from, again, when BMW was heavily invested in BMW Sauber, their F1 team, and a lot of the thought process behind the performance, the high revving, naturally aspirated, the sensation you get from the motor.
For 2006, this is an impressive motor, and for that era, I mean, this has a dedicated oil cooler. And
this is really a high performance engine. Runs 10 W60, and you know, we can have arguments all day about
that oil's thick with 3 C's.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it does run hot, obviously, but this is a very special design. It's a very special engine, much like the E92, and there hasn't been anything like it since.
No. We haven't gone out yet, but you've just driven the recent M5. It'll be interesting to see your comparisons between the two. The thing I will say about this car, and this will go for pretty much any M car of this generation, or like the E46s as well, you have to make sure you warm up your engine before you take it out. That's where a lot of your preemptive failures come from. It's just not proper.
Yeah, and you have to understand how mechanically what you're dealing with here. You're running thick oil, you want to warm it up. Same thing with the transmission. It's like any car, you don't want to just go out and hard pound it, but this is even more sensitive because all the clearances, even the mains, the rod bearings, all of that, the clearances are crazy tight on these motors, and that's one of the things you just have to.
Yeah, when you buy one of these cars, and the owner who owns this has said this to me, you want to make sure you have all the service. I mean, you don't want to be playing roulette.
Exactly. Well, enough of all this, Jack.
Yeah.
Let's get on the road and listen to the way this thing sounds.
Perfect.
You know why you buy this car?
Why?
The engine. And let's let that do all the talking, shall we? All right. That is unbelievable. It sounds like a supercar, namely with this aftermarket exhaust. Why is it special?
This car is dominated by the motor, right? It's a V10 that BMW took a lot of their designs from Sauber, right? It has a quasi-dry sump oiling system. It makes 500 horsepower. It's a 12:1 compression ratio, and it makes its max power at 7,750 RPM. And the motor is incredible. That being said, the realities of this car are, I mean, you're buying basically a $100,000 car that's been beat down to either $15,000 or $25,000.
Yeah, and I think that's the scariest part about this. And one of the things that, after doing some research, you realize on the used market, from the separation of time, good luck trying to find one of these that doesn't have 3 or 4 owners. And in some of them, in some cases, you see
7, 9, 10.
Yes, and when you see that many owners on a car, you know that there's been some serious problems with it.
You and I kind of disagree on this point. I think if you bought this car and you had a warranty, you went to CarMax, you could find one that's a manual. This SMG is terrible. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for saying that, but it's terrible. It's like my first manual is what it feels like.
It is. It's like BMW said, oh, we're gonna create a better manual trans that feels like a manual, but it's not a manual and it's not as engaging, but it has all the negative attributes as a manual. The delays in shifting, the sluggishness, the jerkiness.
And if you get rid of the SMG, you get rid of half of your very numerous reliability problems.
Yes, and I would have to have a manual, and they're extremely hard to find.
I guess getting back to my earlier point though, so say you could get a manual with a warranty, I would have no problem buying this car if you didn't do long road trips.
I think that's the deal breaker for me because, you know what, me and you drive a lot.
Yeah, I do 60,000 miles every probably 2 years in my personal car. You're the same way.
Yeah, would you trust to take this on a trip?
Oh, hell.
I wouldn't either, and I think that's why I wouldn't even consider it. Yeah, the engine's amazing, and if you had a manual trans, it would be fun, but it's just not... Okay, remove from time. When this car came out, take a look at all the reviews. People said this was the
best car in the world. Yeah.
God's gift to man.
And for 2006, I mean, you compare this to some of the piles that came out in this era. This thing's incredible.
It's just, to me, it's typical BMW stuff. They push the bleeding edge of engineering, and it doesn't last. It's got reliability issues. You know, a lot of cars do, high-performance cars. but it's not great on the track. And it's...
No, this is slower on a tight course than a regular M3. It's slower than, hell, an S2000 on a tight racetrack.
Right. So you're getting, basically you're buying a comfortable sedan that handles extremely well, but not motorsports.
For a sedan, yeah.
For a sedan, and then you have a great motor.
I know we joked about this in the shop, but this is Russian roulette for cars, right? For every 5 that are decent, I'm not even sure if that's the ratio, there is one that will bankrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure because they sold so few of these, that's the other risky factor, is you're going to rely on the aftermarket. And if you don't, for however long BMW offers parts for this, you are going to get bent over on pretty much everything. They had to do an ABS module slash, what was it, stability control module? $4,000 for one part from BMW.
Your rotors at I mean, a brake job on this car is $3,000. Again, this is this used to be a $100,000 car that's been beat down to 15 grand.
If you didn't have money set aside for the repairs, if you got this dirt cheap and you set aside like 10 grand for it, I'd say you love this car, go for it. Experience what it's like to have it, because this is one of those cars that's a checklist item for a lot of people. And let's kind of get into some of the positive things, and I'm going to drive this here a little aggressively. The transmission is in kind of middle mode. You can change the shift speed. So just imagine if you're banging gears yourself, the faster you shift, you just select it digitally, how fast you want it to shift. I keep it on medium because, well, it sounds like you're going to blow the transmission up when you have it in hard mode.
This is one of the few cars where I have mechanical sympathy for the trans when it's shifting.
Yeah, it's really crazy. But in terms of steering and feedback, it's typical M-car stuff. It's like a heavier M3, E92 M3 of that generation.
If you've driven an E92, this will feel very similar.
Yeah, it feels very similar. Dynamically, it's very neutral. It's very balanced. To get this thing to oversteer or just get crazy, you have to be really stupid. It does exactly what you want it to do. This has to be one of the better feeling, better handling sedans, honestly, that I've ever been in, besides maybe the Giulia, the Quadrifoglio. The brake feel is good. Steering feel is really solid.
Typical of this generation. There's a lot of great feel.
I mean, everything about this car in terms of performance is really, really good. I mean, honestly, when you strip away all the things that, you have to deal with now that we're in the future, not in the past, I would still love to drive this if it was somebody else's car.
No, this is the best, hey, can I borrow your car for the weekend?
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. The more you drive it, the more you appreciate it, but it's one of those cars back from the naturally aspirated era. It's best when you're pretty much flat out, including the transmission.
They won't make another car like this.
No,
for emissions and all that other reasons.
It's an end-of-the-era car.
God, that motor sounds fucking amazing.
And even when you downshift, the downshifts aren't like what you expect from the new torque converted or dual clutch transmissions, but again, this is an older car, and it's interesting to see how
there are a lot of parts that have aged well. Outside of the trans, this car has aged exceptionally well, and if you got a manual, you get rid of a lot of those issues.
Exactly.
The manual's worth the extra money in this car.
If you can find a manual, if let's say you want this car, you love it, you love the looks. I really like the way it looks. I didn't like the way it looked when it came out, but now I think it's aged really well. This is one of the
few cars that the critics have kind of swayed on. Originally, they thought this thing was super ugly. Now, everybody loves it.
Yeah, it looks good. If you want this, find one with low miles, not 100 owners, and get a manual transmission. And then
try to get a warranty.
You get a warranty, man. Holy shit. All right, that's good. Final thoughts on the M5. Now, I've had a month to stew on this before I release the video. I've done more research, I've read Brian's articles, and if you don't know who Brian is, he writes for Road and Track, and he owns this generation M5, so check that out. But here's the conclusion. When we first got in this car to do shooting, it had a fault code for the EDC dampers failing, or something related to that. The next day, I was on the back of a pickup truck trying to get B-roll shots, and it threw a check engine light. And, we're stuck going like 35, 45 miles an hour. And I think that sums it up for me. This is best bought as a second or a third vehicle in your fleet. If you're younger and it's a checklist car, and you can get it for cheap, set aside some money for this car and maybe a beater. That way you can really enjoy it for what it is. You know, take it out on the weekends, punish it, enjoy the engine, the transmission, and that's really the best part of this car is that V10. It's a last generation motor, but it is so rewarding and it sounds so amazing when you put an exhaust on here. And it's something that you can't get until you get to an exotic car in this modern age. If you get a manual transmission, you're gonna really be able to, you're not gonna have the worries that you're gonna get with the SMG. And let me talk about the transmission for a second. It's straight up archaic. I get why BMW is trying to design it, but it just sucks, honestly. And if you're getting it as kind of like a collectible, you might like kind of the quirkiness of it. It's something to experience, that's for sure. The chassis, the suspension setup, the way that this car rides and behaves for its size. This is no track machine. This is no crazy hyper performance car, but for the weight and how balanced it feels driving it, I don't know, like I said in the video, there's even modern cars don't do it this well. And as a complete package for how old it is a special car. And I think despite the looks and some of the probably negative attention you're gonna get from it from the bros, I was filming this car in the middle of nowhere and I got literally surrounded by 3 dudes in tight jeans that came out of nowhere in a Mercedes. And they're like, yo, bro, I used to have one of these and I crashed it. We had so much attention from a lot of people that you probably don't want attention to. You got to weigh that in, but you also have to weigh in the fact that obviously there's something special about the M5, and that's why people love it so much. So if you can read between the lines and you understand what we're trying to get at here, you might really love this car, and you may want to stay 1,000 feet from it or get a restraining order against it if you're worried. But thanks again for watching. Take care. I'll see you on the next video.
This SavageGeese, I hate him. I'm gonna show you how to get back at him on Yelp and all that other stuff.